Okay, so we're going to move into Jainism now. Jainism is one of the oldest religions in the world, coming out of India and emerging as kind of a critique and modification of traditional ancient Hinduism. It's a very complex and difficult religion to fully comprehend, so I'm going to break it down into its more basic elements so that we can hit the highlights and understand the broad sweep of the religion. Okay, the founder of Jainism is Mahavira. He was one of the great leaders, what they call a Tirthankara, and he was not the first. Even though he reworked the religion, he revamped it, particularly the law of karma. The religion emerged from older traditions and older leaders. He says, "There's no knowledge without right faith, no conduct is possible without knowledge, without conduct there is no liberation, and without liberation there is no deliverance." So they believe in a cycle of birth and rebirth, and possible liberation from it. Okay, a few dates that are important to remember here. Sometime around the 9th or 10th centuries BCE, we have one of the Tirthankaras, Parshva, who's been told that Mahavira's parents were followers or disciples of the teachings of Parshva. He emerged as the 23rd Tirthankara. Mahavira, sometime between 6 and 800 BCE, we've been able to establish his historical identity as well as Parshva's, but none of the other Tirthankaras that are listed in Jainism as of yet. Around 300 BCE, we have the compilation of Jain sacred texts. There was a split between two groups, Svetambaras and the Digambaras, and we'll mention the differences between those in just a moment. And then around 800 CE, we have the composition of the Adi Purana by Jainism. These are a lot of the main texts, the Puranas that we have of Jainism. And then there were some subgroups of Svetambaras that emerged in the early modern period. And of course, during the 20th centuries, there's migrations of the Jains to the west. They also have immense and beautiful architecture. They're well known for their temples and holy sites, as you can see from the pictures. Okay, so let's go into the two different groups here. Essentially, the two groups had a big schism in 367. And this was around 160 years after the Nirvana, or the liberation of Mahavira. The split most likely took place gradually, and really there's not a huge difference between the two groups. We might divide it between what we would think of as liberal and conservative groups. So the Digambaras were the more conservative bunch. They believe that Mahavira did not marry. They're very much more strict and restrictive in their tradition, as only men can be monks, because their monks are holy men, their ascetics are supposed to walk around nude, and women are not allowed to do that. So the female followers and disciples in this branch of Jainism are clothed, and they're called arikyas. However, they are not full-fledged monastic members of the community. They are women that take on many of the vows of a monk, but they are not considered a monk in the true sense, because only males can do that. They also believe that some of the big teachings within Jainism, the agamas, were lost during a great fire and famine. So they don't really believe that the text survived more than almost 1,000 years from Mahavira. Svetambaras, though, however, allow women to be full-fledged monks in the order. They're called sattvis, and they wear white seamless clothes, so basically long sheets that they use as wraps. And women can also attain liberation in this branch of Jainism. They also concede that Mahavira did marry and had some daughters. So you can see how there's not really a whole lot of essential differences between the two. It's more practical and functional differences in their terms of their understanding of males and females in the faith, and the severity of the dress and that kind of thing. The big difference between women being able to be liberated or not is important, so I'm not trying to downgrade that one. Okay, so originally the religion kind of emerged as a rejection of the Hindu priestly class and the caste system. They wanted to kind of do away with that and allow for individual spiritual progress and overcoming the temptations that face life. There is no one all-subsuming position or practice in Jainism, other than some of their core beliefs, because they have different ideas about pluralism, so that all ideas are not quite equal. So one of their principles is anekantavada, and that is a plurality of perspectives. So they believe that there are different ways of viewing truth, questions of life, and that we must respect opposing perspectives and think through them from both sides. They have another principle called Siyadavad, and this means conditioned predication. So whenever they try to assert something about reality, because there are multiple positions and viewpoints, it is a conditional statement. So it is generally the case that sometimes they use clarification statements like that so that they don't teach things in absolute terms. They have another principle called Nahyavade, which means partial standpoints. So since we are in the larger scale of things, there's a plurality of perspectives, but when we're talking about specific practices and issues, it needs to be narrowed down to more specific perspectives. So this is a way to clarify statements without violating this idea of the plurality of perspectives. Okay, so Mahavira emerged as the 24th Tirthankara, and he's called the Great Hero. Essentially, a Tirthankara is a liberated one, one who has obtained liberation but yet comes back as a teacher to guide others. There's a Siddha who is a liberated soul that sits at the top of the universe, and these are Tirthankaras who have been liberated and don't come back. They are eternal beings existing at the top of the universe in the abode of the Siddhas. But however, the Tirthankaras are important in Jainism because they are the great teachers in the religion. They're very old. You can see this. It's 2.603672 sextillion years is the lifespan of a Tirthankara. That's 10 to the 21st power, and they can come back at different times, and there's at least 20 of them existing at the same time or any one time in the universe. So he was born in Vaisali in 599 BC, died presumably in 527 BCE. At 30, like most religious founders, he started his religion, essentially. He followed the rule of Parshva. Remember, it's told that his parents were disciples of this tradition. And he came up, or emphasized two basic principles. Extreme asceticism, walking around naked. He walked around naked. He also practiced ahimsa, non-injury of living things. This principle of ahimsa is actually the most characteristic feature of Jainism. That's what they're really well known for. They don't believe in harming anything, and that can include plants as well. So some Jains who are very strict, particularly the monks, will not eat root vegetables because you must pull them out of the ground and commit violence against them, or drink milk because that is doing a violence in taking the milk from the cow. So you can pretty much think of them as vegans, but a lot of times they'll only eat things that naturally fall to the ground, like apples, fruits, vegetables that grow from vines and above ground that follow the natural course of things. And they realize that there's a practicality to life as far as sometimes you have to eat to survive, and so they allow for that. They also, as the religion grew and developed, they grew to allow an idea of just war, I guess, and military service, so that if you kill in self-defense, it can be justified. There were many great monarchs and military generals who were Jains in ancient India. However, his asceticism was very extreme. So he was nude, as I said. He refrained from speaking to anyone to avoid making any kind of attachments in this world. And his goal was to obtain moksha. Moksha is the word for liberation in Jainism. You can also see it's called nirvana as well, like in Buddhism. But moksha is, of course, the Hindu word for liberation. So Mahavira was a Jina, a conqueror, one who achieved Kevala, pure omniscient consciousness. So these Jinas can be anyone. Any person can be a Jina. And of course, it also depends on if you're in the Digambara, Svetambara, subgroups. But anyone can be a conqueror. Not everyone can be a Tirthankara, and not everyone can be a Siddha, who sits at the top of the universe. But you can kind of think of them as a progression of roles. So you have a Jina, one who achieves omniscient consciousness. They may become a Tirthankara, which would be a teacher to come back and teach others, or they could be a Siddha that sit at the top of the universe as pure omniscient beings. There is no God in Jainism necessarily. These Tirthankaras and Siddhas and Jinas are role models to emulate. They are wise teachers. It's essentially an atheistic type of religion. The universe is very old and eternal. So, they challenged Hinduism, the caste system. They're very egalitarian in many aspects, very democratic in their idea of living as a community. They're extremely well-read. Most of the scholars in India, in ancient India in particular, were the Jains. Their libraries are unmatched in antiquity, and this is because of their idea of celebrating the different viewpoints. The body of knowledge that ancient Jains had before we lost many of the texts of the Great Famine would have been immense. They were considered the scholars of the ancient world in many respects. Scriptures were not sacred, neither were priests have a special authority over the average individual layman. They also modified the idea of karma from Hinduism. They essentially said instead of karma being kind of more your punishment in the next life for how you lived in the previous life, they divided reality up into two parts. Jiva, the life force, the soul, the active substance of life. And then they have Ajiva, or matter, which is the lifeless dimension to the world. And in this, the soul can literally accumulate karma. So it's something that actually attaches to their essence, their soul, that drags them down, so that when they are reborn, they come back as a lower form of life a lot of times. Or in Jainism, as we'll see in a second, they do believe in different levels of reality, and there are heaven and hell type places in between the middle and upper areas of the universe. Hell's not really a punishment, it's kind of more like a waiting place where once the bad karma is used up and burned off the soul, then they can be reborn again and jump back into the cycle of rebirth. So because of their idea of nonviolence and of the sacredness of life itself with their vegetarianism, they really pursue works of justice and social work as well. Also really big on cultural advancements. We always saw the architecture that came out of Jain's traditions, beautiful architecture in India. Now, a good Jain, or a monk, must take the great vow. There are 5 of them, the 5 great vows. The first one that we've already mentioned is nonviolence, ahimsa, and this is to renounce killing and deny the rights of others to kill. You'll see a lot of times the ascetics, especially the monks, will carry a broom in front of them as they walk, and they will sweep the ground to avoid killing any microorganisms or insects that might be along their path. They will cover their mouths so as not to inhale a bug or a lower form of life. They believe in truthfulness, not lying. They think that lies arise from greed and fear and other different character traits. Also non-stealing, renounce all forms of stealing. Do not use anything except that which is freely given to you. They believe in simplicity, really they do. Chastity, of course, renounce sexual pleasures. Non-possession, so not having attachment to things or people. Okay, a lay person is not excluded from being a part of the religious community. They just may not be monks in the full sense, but they do have vows that they must abide by in their lives. Essentially maintaining the same principles of ahimsa, not lying or stealing or being unchaste. If you're married, that means that you have to be chaste to your spouse. And you need to be generous with your money and your wealth. Don't travel too much, lead a simple life. Guard against bad things that can be avoided. Meditate at certain periods. Observe special fasts and periods of self-denial. And then also sit and study under a Jain monk for some time in your life and devote your energies to learning about the scriptures and the teachings of Jainism. Okay, so I've talked about the different levels of the sacredness of life in Jainism, the extreme vegetarianism. Human beings are the highest form of life because of our level of consciousness and ability to contemplate the universe. Time is eternal in Jainism. They believe that the universe is eternal. It's already gone through endless ages and millions and sextillions of years. It's infinite. There's no God or creator or ultimate being. Time for a person is divided into 12 spokes or ages during which we progress. Okay, and then I've also talked about the idea of the Syatavada, this idea of conditioned predication, exploring the nature of reality from multiple perspectives. Okay, here is a picture, of the way in which the Jains see the universe. So you have the middle level, which is the abode of humans and animals. You have the lower spaces, the Naraka, the abode of hellish beings that spontaneously appear and have a specific lifespan. You might be in hell or a hellish area for different amounts of time. Might be in the billions of years, it might be in the millions of years, but it's usually a long period of time. The kind of time spans that Jainism works on are quite immense. So you have different levels of heavens as well, and heavenly beings. Remember, they don't believe in God per se, but on elevated beings certainly. And then at the very top of the universe are the Siddha, Siddha Sila, the abode of the liberated beings, and this is where all the infinite Siddhas reside once they've obtained liberation or moksha from their cycles of birth and rebirth. Okay, so they have one major set of holy texts that I need for you to remember, and that's the Purvas. The Purvas were bodies of text that were taught by all the Tirthankaras and are not really disputed amongst the followers of Jainism. However, the Agamas are divided within the community. The Svetambaras believe that most of these Agamas survived the famine and fire. The Digambaras believe that most of them were actually lost after the famine, but that a couple of texts by Mahavira did make it because they were memorized. So this is another way in which the two groups are kind of distinguished from one another, but not huge essential differences. And that's a broad 20,000-foot view, really, of Jainism. I hope you've gotten most of the basic principles and ideas and vocabulary down as far as their metaphysics and their ethics and the way they view the world in the progression from a Jina, or conqueror, who has obtained this idea of liberation, omniscience, to someone who's a Tirthankara, who is a great teacher who tries to lead others to become Jinas. And then you have the Siddhas, who are the ones who are liberated, and they sit at the top of the universe. Thank you.